Are you ready to dive deep into meaningful discussions, explore personal stories, and gain practical insights that can transform your approach to mental fitness? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Real Talk Mental Fitness Podcast, where open conversation and authentic connections come together to empower your mental well-being. I'm your host, Chinazom, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Okay, right. We're very excited to have this conversation, and we're super grateful that Julian has given up his time to come and share his insights with us. So this is our latest version of Real Talk Mental Fitness, and we have our special guest today, Julian, who I'm going to let him do his introduction. And also, I'm co-hosting with my pilot, EJ. EJ, do you want to say anything before?
We're just excited for you all to hear directly from Julian today, and we're hoping that you enjoy this conversation.
Okay. All right, Julian, please, let us introduce yourself.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on here. And as I told you guys before we even hit the record button, it is so cool to see a husband and a wife do a podcast together. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I think it brings even the family and you all even closer together. I just think so. Maybe you hopefully inspire other husband and wives to do that. I think it's a way to increase that healthy culture in the family. But for me, I like to say I'm a guy who's just curious and is always just asking the question, what's next? That's my ethos. At the center of everything is what's next, and that's driven me. And so, not to get too far back, but probably my story, big part begins when I was in New York City. I was in medical school, and it's a big thing when you come from first generation, and you feel like a king. You are the golden child, and it does the things to your ego, your mindset, and everything. But then when I was in New York, I started meeting other people who are really living their dream, and they're combining something that they love, their career, but also doing it in a way that really brings them fulfillment. And for me, that stuck out in my head. I couldn't get it out of my head. It just always kept following me. I'm sitting in an exam for like 3 hours, and this idea is in my head. It's like, do you really want to be here? I like health, but I only really wanted to be one type of doctor. And if I didn't get that type of doctor, I was going to be very disappointed. And so I decided to just look out 20, 30 years down the line. And I did not want to have regret. I think that's one of the worst things that you can have inside your body is just regret. It's a very bad feeling. I didn't want it. So I finished that first year, and then I decided not to go back. And I was really happy. I was like, I found my vision, and everyone was just going to say, yes, you found your vision. We're here to support you. And I got zero of that. Absolutely zero. And some people say, hey, maybe you can go take a drug test or something. Or what happened to you in New York? You came back a different person. So I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. It's the South. It's southern U.S. Very different than up north. We're much nicer. So no offense to anyone.
None taken.
We understand. We just went to Louisiana, so we completely understand what you mean.
Okay, awesome. So after I do that, and it's just been a journey. It's been a bunch of different things of experimenting and essentially thinking of my career like a scientist. I first started with health as just a way of personal training. And then just with myself, I thought there's had to be something more. And then I keep adding different pieces on. I get mentorships. And then I get the idea at a dinner with executive health. And one, you hear executive health, you think about entrepreneurs and CEOs and things like that. And that's true. But really, for me, it's about being the executive of your life, being the CEO of your health and life. That's the most important thing. So now it's really a double meaning, because too many times I saw we give our personal power away. If somebody tells us we can't do something, we just take that. If we don't have something, they tell us something runs in our family, we just accept it. And that's never really been my case. I got in trouble a lot as a little boy because of that, but I think it's serving me well now.
Oh, I'm getting chills, Julian, because I just do believe that the universe has brought you to us, because everything you said just resonated. Definitely also, I'm going to talk about the Nigerian upbringing. When you're coming up, you're either going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a lawyer, or you're going to be an engineer. There was no other options. And I loved, as you were saying, once you start doing what your parents want, you do become the golden child, especially if you're the first one to do it. And it does get to you. And I saw maybe with the people before me where they never got to think what makes you happy. Like, who cares? Like, what are you talking? when you said when you finally decided to chase your dreams, and people said, "I think you need to get a drug test," that really resonated with me because everyone's just looking at you like, "What's happened? Is something wrong?" And when you said about the bitterness, that was the thing where I was doing a job, I had financial security, but something was just missing. And I remember the bit when I actually decided I have to leave my job was like, I saw myself in the future, like with my family. And I was like, I didn't want to be one of those dads who absolutely hated my job. I just kept going in and saying, I'm doing it for my family. Because I remember reading the book, it's called Vitrol. Like the bitterness starts to like build up in your system and then it comes out everywhere. So it takes a lot of courage to actually say, I'm not going to do this. Like I'm going, whatever else, I'm going to try and find that happiness. And your executive health, I just love that where people need to become the CEO of their life, because that's, for me, is like when you have your mental fitness, you need to become world class at managing it. Because if you lose your mental fitness, nobody's going to give it back to you. So it really touches me about what you're doing. And I can't wait to dive more into this conversation. But EJ, I don't know.
No, I mean, I want to hear more about, because you touched on it a little bit with the questions that people were asking you, those that were nearest and dearest to you, but I'd love to hear more about how that actually felt for you. What awareness did it raise in you? And like, what did you learn from that reaction and what you took from that experience and how that's shaped or didn't shape how you then move forward as you like built up this incredible executive health initiative. So yeah, I'd just love to hear more about what that experience was for you. So.
Yeah, I would tell you initially it really made me mad because I tend to be a person who's kind of, I wouldn't say running hot, but I wouldn't say I remember things and keep grudges, right? So initially I'm like, what are you talking about? Like everyone? Like what do you mean? And so probably for a couple of years, I had this thing. It was just me against the world. And probably when I went to therapy, the first time, went to therapy, and I learned to kind of be a little more empathetic and start learning how to see the world through other people's eyes. And what I saw with a lot of people was really a sense of love and also a sense of fear, both, right? So if you see someone say, "Hey, I'm going to start something that doesn't exist," you never see me write a day in my life. You never knew I write. You never knew I liked any of these things. But I'm just going to go do this, and I'm going to just punt away this other thing that's more of a known commodity. That if you pass your exams and all that, you're going to have a job. You're going to have something, and so you're going to have security. And so for a lot of these people, they value security. They value comfort. Me, I like those things, but it's not at the top of the list. For me, I like adventure and I like just seeing what's my limit, what can I do? Because I came to the conclusion that at the end of the day, whenever my time is gone, if I can at least look at myself in the mirror and say, hey, I gave it my all, I went after what I wanted, and if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. I'm happy. But I do not want to be at the end and saying, well, I should have done this, but my mom and dad said I shouldn't, and my aunts and my cousins and my friends said I shouldn't do that. Then you're taking away your personal power and you're putting it on other people and you're building resentment. And I didn't want that. So at the end of the day, I'm good with it now, but also now I have learned to kind of use this fire, this drive in a much more constructive way. Some people talk about this thing called the dark side. Tim Grover has some books on it, right? And a lot of athletes use it. And it's a way to always keep yourself driven for me. But you're doing it in a way that doesn't become toxic. And that's what I had to learn, that there's a fine balance between wanting to prove people wrong, wanting to do certain things, but not doing it in a way that's also just going to be really detrimental to yourself. And you stop taking care of yourself just because you're just so focused on proving a point to other people that you just completely forget yourself.
This was a question we were talking before. For me, it was like, so how did your parents shape your view of mental fitness and the way you're practicing it now?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Well, my parents had no idea about mental fitness, but inadvertently, though, I think they showed me that a little conflict is healthy in terms of you're not always going to 100% agree with someone, but it doesn't mean you love them any less. And in fact, conflict can actually drive you closer. Conflict is, to me, anytime maybe there's a slight disagreement or a slight difference of the way you see something, right? And you got to debate it out. So for me now, I have no problems ever talking with anyone who doesn't see the world the same way I see it. I think it's cool because um, time's going to prove maybe what's closer to being the truth there, or we're each going to be able to help each other level up. So for me, I think that's one of the best things is conflict. And there's probably one other one, and it's that my mom didn't say this until after my father passed, and she's like, I wish we actually, went to like therapy and just learned how to be even better communicators and stuff. And so I think in my community, it's such a forbidden thing to to go to therapy because I tell you, I kept that thing a secret. They're like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm just going to the gym, going to work out at 6:30 night. Yeah, I'm just going again.
Sorry, no.
Yeah,
You took that to the grave until you decided not to take it to the grave. That's
because we got pride. We got pride. It's a lot of different pride, right? You're just supposed to go to the church and pray, and then that's it. And so so you had to really do a lot of unraveling throughout the years and say, well, all these other people I know do counseling, therapy, mentorship, whatever. They seem to know something that we don't, and I seem to, right? And so if I'm just going to look out and remove any sort of racial thing or any culture thing, right, and just look at this from a very practical standpoint, it's going to make sense that you can't do this alone. And odds are there's a lot of things that probably you suppressed throughout the years, such as it seeming like everyone thought this was a bad decision for me. So I needed to actually work through some things and learn how to be let's see, a kinder person to myself. And it sounds weird to even say out loud, really, to like how to love yourself a little more. It's just such a foreign concept to me still, but it's something that I do think about and practice more.
I love that. I was going to ask you, when you were going to those that knew you the best, or that you normally go to for guidance and advice and feedback, and they were all unanimously saying, "Hey, this sounds Looney Tunes." What did you say to yourself, like in that moment?
Well, one, I was like, I can't believe. Well, one was the shock initially, and just irritation, and then after I got over that for a little bit, I had to probably do what I always do, and that's just go seek out information. And so you go find a bunch of different books, you go listen to different YouTube interviews of different entrepreneurs and stuff like that, and you start to, I just put out into the world that I gotta get a different crew for this phase that I'm going to. They're still there, so I didn't throw them to the side, but it's like a TV show, right? These people maybe are on seasons 1 through 3. But then we got to keep the season fresh. I want to go in a different direction with the show. So we got to bring in some new characters, and maybe they're just recurring now, but they're not just there every episode. And so that's kind of how I looked at that. And I had to start building just that different network. So one, I started with getting a mentor, someone who's similar situation as me, but years down the line. That was super, super beneficial, right? It helped mellow me out. It helped say, okay, all these things that you want to do, it takes time. And it's like baking a cake. There's a recipe with that. There's a time you put on there. You can try to turn the temperature up to cook it faster, but it's going to mess the cake up. And so that clicked in my head. I didn't like the answer, honestly, because I wanted it now. But I learned to start accepting it over time, and I started to feel better.
I like that analogy of the cake because it's the way I think of it is you can't run faster than your legs can take you.
That's very true as well.
Yeah, but the cake analogy is a great one because you could raise the temperature, but the outcome, that cake is going to be wonky, inedible. So that's an interesting, because normally you would say, oh, I'm just going to raise the temperature, I'll get there faster.
And and there's another thing is that a lot of times, I know at least with myself personally, that a lot of the things I wanted and is still going after, I have to really be honest with myself and say, am I ready for those things?
Mm,
That
yeah.
that comes with that, because we can want certain types of success, we can want certain types of health and fitness with ourselves, but do you want what comes with that? Is your identity ready for that? Is your habits and behavior set up for that? Because we've seen a lot of times, especially in the world of athletics, that someone goes from having nothing to instantly becoming a multi millionaire, and their mindset didn't change. So they can have all these things, but their mindset's going to change, and so they're going to revert back to what they were initially over time, slowly but surely.
Hmm. I love the thing you said about self-love, because I think that is the most important thing: self-love and self-compassion to just get through what we're getting through now. And when you talked about going to therapy, how you had to hide that, it made me laugh, because in the Nigerian community as well, that's something that's just not talked about. And I've been openly talking about it, and it's strange. Like, once I started openly talking about it, there's a group of guys I hang around with, and it's quite funny that people say, I'm going to therapy as well. I'm going to therapy as well, but they'll only say it to me. So I like that that's starting to change, and I feel that I would love to hear now, how are you practicing this self-love, and how are you trying to grow that in whatever you're doing?
Yeah. So for me, I have recordings of different affirmations, and I have different things of like my I am, and so I am this, I am that. I have a bunch. I have a bunch of those that I listen to daily, and one of these is every 3 hours still, because it's something I'm really focusing on this year. So really keeping myself on there, because it's something that's very far away from where I am right now, and so it's almost scary to me. So I listen to that just to be in that state. Um, I also am very mindful of the content I consume now, and very mindful of that. I used to just let anything go on my news feed and everything, and now these days I have to curate it, because you don't think it affects you until you just see that it affects you, and you're just like, man, why do I feel like this all of a sudden? And you just have all this bad mental residue that's just going down your timeline, and conversations as well with people. Um, I do not just allow gossip and just complaining in my life. Um, I allow you to do it for a little bit, but then I'm like, did you just want me to listen, or do we want a solution? But we can't just continually, you know, bring ourselves down to keep making ourselves feel like a victim, because that's only going to make us feel worse. So it's little things like that, and then really guard it with who I hang around with, and where I go, and those types of things for the most part. Just because those are things that I can control. So I can guard my environment. I can be really mindful and precise with what I allow into my mind. And then of course there's exercise as well. That's a given. And then eating and all that good stuff. But it's really those things of just, I have to constantly remind myself of who I am, where I'm going, and what's my truth. Because a lot of times I practice visualization. And when you're visualizing, you can see all these things in your mind. You can see everything coming to fruition, right? But then you open your eyes, you start going out into the world, and this physical reality is much different than what's in your head, right? And so so how do you handle that gap right now? And that's where I just got to continually remind myself to be in the state of the person that exists in my head right now, and be kind of disregarding what I see in the physical reality right now, because everything I see in the physical reality right now is really just a manifestation and something created from everything I've done in the past.
So powerful. Because for me, like, a big thing is updating your identity.
Mhm.
So a lot of times in the coaching practice, when I ask people what's going well in your life, or what are you proud of, everybody struggles. Like, they can't. But I ask them what went wrong. Oh my God! Like, you can start reeling out the things. And as you were saying that, I was like, I love what you're doing now with your self-love. You're actually updating your identity, and it's something that people have to constantly practice. And I'm actually struggling with. I'm now realizing, even myself, I have to keep telling myself about all the things I've done, so that the vision I see in my head, you're right, because I can visualize everything.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you open your eyes and you come into the world, it just seems like this distant thing. And you have to keep your energy at a certain level, which means that your identity has to always be the thing that's going to bring the vision. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's something that is a practice, because I tell you, it's definitely a work in progress for me still, and that's why I do it so much. So I'm definitely right there with you in terms of continually to work on this, because I think it's at the very beginning of the stage. You're just so sensitive to it, right? Because it's not just really solidified yet, and so it's any little thing a lot of times can maybe trigger you, or just snap you out of that state.
Yeah.
And so that's why this beginning stage is much harder. And I didn't really realize this until, like I said, another mentor and some coaching. And I kept wanting to focus on different tactical things, whether it comes with business, whether it comes with relationships, whether it comes with my fitness and health. I always wanted to find something externally that was going to be the solution. And I had to just really switch that around and go internally first and foremost. And that's the thing that is probably hard for a lot of people, right? Because we think if we just get this one thing out here, it's going to change everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just not really as sexy to say, you need to work on your identity, you work on your truths, what do you stand for, your integrity, work on um, and those things. It's just not as exciting, right? It's boring.
It's scary.
It's
It's scary.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's not as exciting. It's boring. It's scary, but also it's less tangible, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. Like, what does that mean? How do you measure that? You know, how do we know when we've gotten there? What do we do between now and when we get there? What if we get there
Where
and
do
we
we
fall
start?
off of it again?
Where do we start?
Yeah, where do we start? Like, so that's why I think as human beings don't want to have that be the answer or the approach, because it's like that's what do you do with that?
yeah. That's the thing, right? And you're so spot on when you said it's scary, it's discomforting, right? You might not like what you see when you hold that mirror up,
Yeah.
and I can, and there's a lot of things we can do now in today's society to never have to really face that. We can always just mask it,
Yeah.
and just say, I'll get to it later, I'll get to it later, I'll get to it later, or just pretend like it never exists.
Yes.
But it's almost like credit card interest a little bit, right? Where if you don't pay it 1 month, right, it adds up, and then you just keep avoiding it. And that 25, I think I've seen this like 25% or so, right? And it just keeps really adding up. And so the further and the more that you disregard it, the more of a burden it's going to be down the line. And I think that's how it is with our identity and our mindset. That the more we keep ignoring a lot of these things, the more of a bigger snowball effect that is going to accumulate down the line.
Man, I love that analogy because you hit it on the nail there. And I think that's why it's so scary and uncomfortable, because it's like, can you imagine a credit card bill that you haven't looked at for 25, 30 years? You don't want to, you just don't want to, like, you just want somebody to just get rid of that thing, like bankrupt me
Like,
or
steal
whatever.
my identity, please.
Yeah,
Steal
yeah,
it today, because I cannot.
And that was what was so shocking about the pandemic, was like all of a sudden there was nowhere to run. The credit card bill was right in front of your face every day, 24/7. And yeah, some people were just like, oh no, this is too much.
yeah. It's during that time, one of the shocking things, but then it's not shocking, was one of the hardest things for people to deal with was they're like, I'm just with myself a lot of times now. And I'm like, I mean, I got more time to really go in. And so that wasn't necessarily difficult for me. But a lot of people, I think it was the first time that they had to forcefully slow down and just sit with themselves, or even sit with their spouse partner
Yeah.
longer than they typically have. So I think some people found out how much they really like their partner, and then maybe not so much, unfortunately. And
Uh,
I've seen those things, this was really shocking to me. A lot of the things that came out of this.
Yeah. Oh, that was a huge. I mean, Chinazum coached all through that period. So, I mean, that was like I did. I mean, I'll let you speak to it, but from where I was sitting, knowing what was happening in me, in my inner circle, and in my life, it was a crazy time, and it was a pressure cooker in so many ways. You know, in all the facets of our lives. And the thing about it as well was that you were evolving, and the person that you're trying to do life with is also evolving. You know, sometimes in synchronicity and sometimes not so much. So challenging time.
Yeah, and that's probably where I can't speak on this because I'm not at that stage yet, but probably where having, I would imagine, some type of culture or some type of shared vision or mission for the household really comes into play then.
mm.
Yeah,
And I love you brought this up because we were on a podcast on Monday and we never even thought about the culture. And the guy asked us, how did mental fitness become part of our family? And we never even thought about that, but it is actually the central core of our family. We just somehow subconsciously didn't even know that it was. But I think we always wanted to learn and we always wanted to push ourselves. So we found that in doing that, you need to sustain your energy, which means that needs to be the driving force. You can't push yourself and then you fall apart. And also the things we care so much about our children. So that means that we have to show up in the best space, for our kids. And slowly, it just started to evolve. And the one thing you said, not just the culture, but inner work. You keep saying that internal. And I believe that in my heart, once I started coaching, I realized that I did all the courses and I'm still doing all the courses. But the more I do the courses, because I can never understand what is it about people, how am I helping them that? And then I realized I have to do the inner work so that I can show up 100% as myself. If I can't show up as myself, it doesn't matter what new tool or whatever I'm talking about. I'm not going to connect with that person and they're not going to get the insights they need. So this inner work is a big part, and the culture that you said.
And I think it's also an energy thing that you can feel, even if it's virtually. You can feel the energy. You can feel someone that's confident. And a lot of times, I think a lot of times people are going to work with you, or or if somebody's looking for a date, they're going to date you, or somebody's looking for a job, you're going to get the job, mainly by a lot of times your energy and how you're presenting yourself. And there's little subconscious things that we don't even think about that just initially attracts us to those things. And for me, of course, it's I need to have a certain physical standard for myself since I am in this industry, but really I need to carry myself with a sense of confidence and certainty. Because a lot of these other people are leaders as well, much like I'm sure when you're coaching somebody, they're a leader in some capacity as well, even if it's just a leader in the household, nevertheless, it's still a leader. So you want someone who's going to embody some of those traits that maybe people are subconsciously kind of yearning and seeking out.
And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Real Talk. We hope you've enjoyed today's discussion and have gained valuable insights into enhancing your mental well-being and productivity. Now, before we wrap things up, we have an exciting opportunity for you. Are you curious about your mental fitness score? Want to know how you can improve your overall well-being and boost your productivity? Well, we have just the thing for you. Head over to our show notes, where you will find a link to our exclusive mental fitness quiz. It's a quick and easy assessment that will provide you with a personalized score and actionable steps to enhance your general well-being and productivity. It's like having a personal coach in your pocket. And don't forget to subscribe to Real Talk on your favorite podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new episodes filled with valuable discussions, expert interviews, and practical tips for leading a fulfilling life. You can also connect with me, Chinazom, on social media. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for daily inspirations, updates on upcoming episodes, and behind-the-scenes peeks into the Real Talk community. Remember, your mental well-being matters, and taking small steps towards improvement can make a significant difference in your life. We're here to support you on your journey. Thank you for tuning in today, and a special thank you to all our listeners who have joined us on this incredible podcasting adventure. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep striving for a better version of yourself. Take care and stay mentally fit.